Welcome everybody to the Voices of the Underground. You're listening to Beans, your host, and we have a room full of people. So I've had a few conversations this week, politics mostly, and what VOTU is as well. I was kind of surprised that some people kind of were saying that, we were talking about really interesting things, and then I would say, you know what, this is actually really interesting for the podcast if we got more people involved in the conversation. This happened various different times. Well, I don't know, politics is just something that people really hate talking about. Get away from the politics. And I thought, for fuck's sake, this is the Voices of the Underground, right? And this is something I want to make clear for the start of the show. Thank you, Narvis. But yeah, I was kind of surprised that some people were kind of like, this might be a little bit too political for VOTU. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, Voices of the Underground is supposed to be about this shit that you don't want to talk about, right? We're called the Underground because
we're the voices we're loud voices here, very talkative voices here.
We're the rebels.
And do have some influence on people, and it's good to have this discussion to get ideas.
We'll talk about the shit that the powers that be wouldn't want you to talk about, right? Do you ever wonder why the Romans spent so much of their wealth and their resources on the Roman Colosseums? You know, those big, massive, outstanding amphitheaters around Europe that fit 50,000 people in the audience so that they can watch gladiators knock the shit out of each other or kill each other. Power is easily maintained when people are distracted by entertainment. But that's why I say it seems like there's certain things that it would be preferred that we don't tap into and solve ourselves. Yeah, that VOTU is supposed to be always, hit on the controversial matters that are going on in the world, or even not going on in the world, but just something that's, important for us to talk about. Because that's the definition of controversial, I think, is actually, in a roundabout way, important. So there's nothing that gets more heated than talking about politics. So my question, right, for you guys, is what do you think, or why do you think we hate talking about politics so much?
It's really hard to talk about politics because 99.9% of everything that we say is probably not true. Most of what we say when we talk about politics, we're not even having facts to back things up. We have feelings and a lot of anger when it comes to these kinds of ideas.
I'm scared to say this. I think government should mine instead of tax.
But what would make them politicians then? What would make them government?
It could be the same as Steve, really.
What makes them use the money that's mined to govern the country?
Similarly, what makes them use the money that they tax?
We put them in those positions. So that's why they use.
Well, what if governments had fiat blockchains that had tax built into it?
What would you do if you discovered that your posts on Steam and Steemit were getting a 20% beneficiary to the tax revenue?
If I was no longer paying tax and the whole system of governance ran on it, yeah, probably it wouldn't be too bad.
If this is blockchain based, then the question is, do you have a choice not to be part of that blockchain and not to be governed, therefore, by the people who are, getting the tax from it? But let's say you had that, but you could also build into the blockchain that they just skip the government part and the tax goes straight to, say, the hospitals or the funding for building the roads or the schools. What do we need the central government for then?
The answer is we don't need a central government. We should grow up and be responsible and handle these things ourselves.
We've been trying that for thousands of years. Whether you have anarchy, representative democracy, communism, it all boils down to this: the survival of the fittest. The strongest are always going to be in charge.
I hear other ideas and my first thoughts aren't let's discuss it. It's what are they talking about?
I want to pose a thought experiment related to this. That is, if anybody in this podcast could be tax exempt, or otherwise not have to pay taxes, get a full tax refund or whatever, however you want to phrase it, would you still pay taxes?
I actually, not to central government though. I think that taxes have a place, they're currently not being used in a very efficient way. Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with having all those taxes and having to pay them if you want to use those systems. So it's sort of volunteering, but only if you actually need to use the service that they provide. Technically, it's not a donation if I have to pay the tax in order to use the service, right? So if in order for me to be allowed to drive on the roads, I have to pay the road tax, then I would probably pay the road tax.
Having a car is road coin, and like 10% of all road coin transactions go to roads or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's what could happen. I mean, you could have EOS full of these crazy blockchains that are all, well, they're not all blockchains, they're all smart contracts, but smart contracts all based around this one thing that that everybody decides whether or not to be part of.
Now, you pay, if you own a home and stuff and you're working, you not only pay the taxes, if you drive, you have to pay tolls on the Pennsylvania roads, you get you an easy pass or something, you have to pay for that. So you have to pay the federal tax, you have to pay the state tax, you have to pay the sales tax, which changes from state to state or province to province, as some of you are more familiar with that term. You have to pay that. You pay all of these things. Our public universities, you have to pay to go to school. You have to pay for healthcare. You pay the insurance company, and yet you have a deductible. So whatever's left over, then you have to pay that. Pay all the time. But taxes are important. If we didn't have taxes, who's going to pay the police? Who's going to pay the fire engines? Who's going to pay this, pay that?
You're paying those taxes because that road is getting paid for with your taxes in order to get you your food locally. Your food doesn't just show up. A truck showed up somewhere.
The way this works is that there are national roads. There are local roads. There are contractual agreements to use those roads, not unlike the Florida Sun Pass. To answer the question of how does your food get across the nation on a truck, on a road you didn't contractually agree to pay something to, it happens like this. Those grocers and truckers and food manufacturers want some money. So in order to make some money, they got to bring you food and sell it to you. And for that to happen, they got to buy some roads to get their product to you, and they will. They might even, instead of building shitty ass roads and diesel cars and fossil fuel shit, build a maglev train.
I have thoughts on it. I do. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I think about this stuff a lot, but I don't like to share them. I feel like we were born into some world where there's a whole bunch of agreements that we don't have any choice in, and government's one of them. And the fact that we live like with 300 million people within a couple thousand miles of us is another one of them. There are so many things that exist in this world that we have no choice on, and I don't really want to be involved in 95% of this, but I have to be because this is what I was born into.
Before I started reading about anarchy, actually while I was reading about anarchy on Steam, it was only because of Dan's blog that I actually gave this whole idea of anarchy a chance. But while reading about anarchy on Steam, I just thought, a lot of this is just a bunch of men who are cranky about having to pay taxes. and it's not that at all, really, is it? It's voluntarism, and it's holding people and systems like governments accountable. So, it has to be right in order for people to opt in. It has to be a system that actually works for people in order for people to actually want to pay for it, right?
What is the end goal of having that good education?
So many of these schools teach in ways that are just not very efficient. Like, look at what we have now. This is the information age. I don't know what it's like in America, right? But in Ireland, you're fucking taught to hate school. You're taught to hate education because you're forced into it. Because you're tested and you're pressured to learn things that you didn't opt into. But I know so many people who learn things outside of school, like music, for example, or just topics that they can't learn in school, and they happen to love them because it's something they decided themselves, whether they be a child or a teenager or a young adult. They happen to love them because they opted into it because it was something they wanted to learn.
If a person can multiply numbers together correctly, they don't get taken advantage of as easily by somebody who knows better. You have the potential to be taken advantage of if you can't do like the simple mathematics, and it's quite scary that how did they get through that much school without knowing it. But then at the same time, like, I didn't know how to farm on Aloe, which is the wetland farming they do in Hawaii. And what does that make me? Because now I can't even feed myself. So like, there's a bunch of problems that I have, and I think one way about math, and I think, well, everybody should be able to do it, but then there's a bunch of problems I have I can't do. I can't figure out how to fix my car when it's broken. I can't figure out how to do a lot of things.
The only thing I'm saying is that I think education is important enough that kids shouldn't hate it when they get into it, right? And I think the way schools are now, at least in Ireland, again, I don't know what it's like in America, but at least in Ireland, I know you're pretty much taught to hate school. Government is a religion. Can we go into that?
Well, Marx wrote that religion is the opiate of the masses, but I think he was self-deluded because of his, we're all products of our environment, right? And I think he was kind of self-deluded in thinking that because he saw government as the solution to problems, and I think government itself is a religion, or at least has become one, and thus is also the opiate of the masses. All governments will become corrupt if you let them, but state and local governments are a lot easier to check their power.
People that I know have unfriended or become angry with me because I did vote for Gary Johnson, because I took a vote away from Hillary or Dumbo the clown.
That's interesting. So in other words, right, people don't feel comfortable voting for somebody if they think that person will definitely not win because their votes basically are lost.
They will sheeple their ass up to some death machine choice rather than register a vote and a voice to try and ever change.
But the problem here, bottom line, here, Europe, all these other places where all these crazy people, all these crazy ass people are getting to be in charge, is because of the complacency, the apathy of the people. And then what happens is tyrants come into power.
There are people who are woke as fuck, but then there's the other 90%.
Stefanos says that chicks still can't vote. I thought I voted, maybe I did it wrong.
Things improve, but people have to get involved in education, getting the word out. That's what's important. Not listening to the talking heads on CNN or Fox News, whichever flavor you like, or MSNBC, but getting the real facts.
How do you get through to the tens of millions of people who claim they don't care about politics, even while it's stepping on their neck every day?
Take a walk from Philadelphia, D.C., like Mo Lovely and I did, for 9 days from Philly to Washington. Go sit on the Capitol steps and say, well, I'm not leaving till they come out and talk to us or you throw us in jail.
If you look at the policies of the U.S. federal government over the last 100 years or so, it's pretty consistent regardless of party. I'll put it in this context. Coke and Pepsi are not actually competing. They don't care which one of them has 49 or 51% market share. They both have a vested interest in keeping RC Cola off your grocer's shelf.
Damn right. Preach it, girl. Preach it.
Thanks everybody for coming. Sorry that we had to very suddenly stop.